the winter time, it's pretty nice where you're at. So you're still waiting a couple more minutes before you're ready.
Let me test. Can I test sharing my presentation to see how that's going to work?
Sure.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I want to share a particular window, I think. So let's go ahead and try that. And does it? Oh, it lets me choose the window. I can't tell which one I want to do. So I think I'll do. Let's try this and see if this works. And then if it doesn't, we'll try something else. Oh, I need to open my window. There we go. Let's share this. What my hope is.
It's working. I'm seeing it working.
Does it say, tell me what you see. Tell me what you see.
I'm seeing mob programming, a whole team approach, your slides. I am seeing a presentation.
And that's it. All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think it's playing.
Full screen.
Yep.
You're seeing a full screen?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Looks good.
Okay, that's something I don't have control over that, I don't think.
No, I'm just seeing only your presentation. I'm not seeing other parts of your screen. Of course, because my view still shows the people in the Zoom on the side, but that's not from yours. I'm seeing only what you have here. So it's looking good.
That's the way Google Meet works, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not real familiar with Google Meet. I use it now and then, but it's not something I'm great at.
Good. Would you like to begin the introduction?
Yeah, may we start?
Give me 10 seconds, please.
Okay.
Okay. Are these Brazilian seconds or?
Okay, we're on.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to start the keynotes of our course on the Extreme Programming Lab. And for this first presentation, we have two big stars from the Agile programming people. We have Joe Yoder. You already know he's a good friend, and he's been collaborating with us for about 15 years or even more. And we also have today Woody Zuill, and he's going to present us a little bit of mob programming. And he has been programming for more than 30 years, works as an Agile coach, application development manager. He and his team are the originators of mob programming approach to teamwork in software development. And he's considered one of the founders of no estimates discussion. So it's very important to hear what he's going to say, because as you are going to work remotely, maybe mob programming, it will be one of the most effective ways to form teams. So please, Woody, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very, very much. So it's a real honor for me to be with you today. I appreciate the chance to share these things with you. And I want to say something up front here that when I started programming, I worked alone because I owned a little company and I bought a couple computers. And because I could tell the industry was changing, this would have been in 1981 or 82. The industry I was in was graphics and designing and signage, which you would do by hand mostly back in the earlier days. But computers were coming on where people could afford to buy them and bring them into their business and use them. So I bought a couple computers, and they worked pretty well. The computers themselves were really good. The hardware was worked out well, but the software didn't work very well. And it occurred to me that if I was going to get the software I needed, maybe I would need to write that myself. So I started learning to program. I couldn't afford to take the time to go to school, but I went to the local university, University of California. San Diego had a supercomputing center, and they had a lot of courses on computer programming. So I went to their library or to their bookstore, and I took my list of their classes and the books you needed to buy, and I started buying the books, and I studied it on my own without taking classes. Again, I was working full time, and I didn't have time to take classes. I figured that if the people that wrote the software that I was using could write such poor software and people were still willing to buy it, that maybe I could write poor software and get people who are willing to buy it, and I could change my living to writing software. I started writing software then alone. I had no one else to work with. About 1997 or 8, I started hearing these rumors about people that were programming in pairs, 2 people sitting at one computer. And I learned how to do that. And if we'll have time, I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But we might not have time. But the basic idea was I was already old enough. I was in my 40s to no longer say, oh, this idea seems crazy. That can't possibly work. You know, because I thought, you know, programmers work alone. But I had learned you don't say that. If you say that can't work, you're usually going to be proven wrong. So I avoided taking that closed-minded attitude, and I thought, well, let me try it. And within a few years, it had become my preferred way of working. By 2002 or 3, I had enough experience with it over 5 years. I didn't want to work without a pair. And then I started experimenting with larger groups, slowly over the years. But then I had a huge opportunity, we might have time for me to share about this later, in 2011, where I was allowed to work with a team to kind of guide them into improving their practices without any interference from management. They basically had to agree that I could work with this team without interference or I wouldn't work with them. And so we discovered on our own, in learning to collaborate well, eventually we learned that we could work really well together if there were, if we learned how to collaborate, we could sit in front of one computer and work without chaos or without difficulty, with 5 or 6 people communicating their ideas and putting them all in the computer at the same time. Well, what is that like? And that's what I'm going to share with you. This is sort of an introduction to mob programming, which I call a whole team approach. Now, I'm going to really make it clear. You're mostly students. I'm very little different from you. I can't tell you what to do or what you should do. That wouldn't be right of me, and it would be very preposterous to think that somebody who just is outside of your world could come in and tell you what to do. So what I want to warn you about is don't take anything I tell you here as being truth as much as being truth from my point of view. And from your point of view, it can be very different. I will tell you, I worked with a team in Brazil the first time I visited, who very quickly gathered these ideas. It was a group of college students. They very quickly understood this way of working. We were just in a one-day workshop, and by the end, they had become almost proficient at these things. So I think that it's worth a try. I'm not telling you what you should do, okay? So let's move on. I love to show this picture. A friend of mine, Joshua Karievsky, once told me, Woody, you should put a picture of a cat into your talks, and that will make you seem more human. Maybe he thought I didn't come across as being a very human person, but that's the way he said it. Anyways, so I found this picture of a cat, and I really love it because it's telling us a story here. And that is that you can look at this map. If the map is drawn the way we see it here, you can almost see, if you outline it, you can get this picture of a cat playing with Australia as if it was a ball of yarn. Well, that's pretend, of course. The continents didn't form and move around so that we could someday see the image of a cat. But this is, again, we look at things from our own point of view and we imprint the patterns we want to see. So this is a warning to you. Don't think that my point of view is the best point of view. You all have valid point of view. You figure out what it has meaning in your own existence. So this idea started with us at Hunter Industries. When they first hired me, they asked me to come to work for them. So I was not as such looking for a job, although I'm always looking for a job, but I wasn't specifically looking to work at this place. But they sent someone to me, someone on their teams, and said, hey, we want you to come and do for our teams some of the stuff that you know about Agile. So I interviewed with them. I told them what I required, and they ended up hiring me. So I honor them very highly for making the decision to hire me, even though they didn't really understand what I was bringing to the mix. But I will point something out here. You see their byline there says, built on innovation. And I pointed that out to them. It was a little bit different saying there, but it had innovation in it when I visited with them. And I said, we are going to be innovating. you have that as your byline. That's like your motto of your company. So you got to realize that we're going to be doing innovation too. It's not that you innovate on irrigation products. We're going to be innovating on how do we work together as a team? How do we become proficient in collaborating? How do we become good at creating the software that is needed by the company? Eventually, we all landed on this idea of mob programming. Hopefully, I'll have time to tell you a little bit more about that story today. But the basic idea of mob programming is we're going to have all the brilliant minds gathered together and working together on this very same thing. That means we're all working on a single piece of work. We're going to be doing that at the same time. We're not going to separate ourselves by time or phases, as they might say, perhaps in a waterfall way of working. And we're going to work in the same space. We're going to be gathered together in the same, basically in the same room, so we can interact really easily. And mob programming takes these three ideas, which I think all come from Agile, that we need to work on the same thing at the same time, the same space, to maybe minimize the difficulties we have in communicating, coordinating things. With mob programming, we just add the idea that we're going to have a single computer. We're all going to be sitting at one computer. Now, there may be other computers around in our work area, but essentially, we're working all at the same computer. All of our input is going through a single computer. It looks, well, I want to say this first. What we're attempting to do in an ideal situation is we're going to gather all the knowledge and skills we need in the people that join the team. When we have all these people together, we're going to have many different specialties, but they're all focused on one thing, so they bring their skills together. In other words, we're going to take a single brain, let's say it was me, and when I add another brain and another brain and another brain, we kind of get a super brain if we're good at working with each other. What if we could tie all of our brains together and operate at the same time on something? That's sort of the idea. Now, by the way, you might have questions, and you might have the chat, you can put them in, but I won't be focusing on that. So if somebody sees an important thing to point out, somebody will need to interrupt me to be able to do that. Okay, let's go on.
I'll take responsibility to do that for you, Woody. So I'll watch the chat.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So this is a shot of our team, a picture of our team working back, I think, in 2013. Once we become extremely proficient at this, because we started working this way in late 2011, almost exactly 9 years ago, I guess, right now, right, this very month or next month. And in this picture, this team has a variety of skills. We have somebody who's an extremely good tester, and they brought that skill to the team. We have a product owner. Their skill is to know, what is this thing supposed to do? In modern terms, I would think the whole team should be the product owner, but let's go on. We have 4 developers, all with different skill levels and areas of expertise. One of them really knows the code base of a lot of the legacy applications in this company, although we had many of them. He had worked there for the longer than anyone else. We also have someone who had recently been a tester and had converted over to being a code writer, so had still a very deep understanding of testing. We had another developer here who I would say is one of the top 10 programmers I've ever worked with. Very brilliant, but at this time a very young person, maybe about 25 years old when we hired him, maybe a little younger than that. But he was just brilliant, one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. And of course, I'm there as a programmer, but also by this time I was more of a facilitator once we had settled down on this way of working. And the last person represented here is a database expert who'd also been with the company for a while and understood all the mechanisms we had for storing data, where that data was, how we can interact with it, all the rules, and so on. So this is a team built of all the skills and knowledge we need, and we're all working together. In the center, I'm going to just use my mouse to point to it. I don't know if it'll really show up, but in the center there is the one computer we're connected with. Now, there are other computers on the table. Oops, I want to go back. You can see one over to the right and to the left. There are other computers around. Matter of fact, right behind where I'm standing is a workstation where several programmers, one of the programmers has their own computer set up. We can access these other computers because we often think at the computer, and we will use it for searching or trying things. but all the work that goes into our work artifacts are going through the single computer that the team is using. Now we have 2 monitors. At this time we were using projectors. We found, and you'll see in a few moments, we found that the large high-resolution monitors, modern monitors, are better, but projectors also give you a kind of flexibility you don't get any other way. And so this is our work area seen from the other direction. And we'll skip ahead, and if we ever have time to come back, we'll come back and look at some of these other things. Here I was in a town in Brazil. I don't know if I can say this correctly. Is that Belo Horizonte or something like that? Am I close? And that I was there for a conference, but I had to work still with my people that I was working with at a firm in Newport Beach, California, and we worked remotely. So this can easily be done remotely. But I want to make it clear, this is not 5 people watching one person coding. If it was that would probably get boring quickly, and it would also not be very effective. What we need to do this, though, is some kind of mechanisms or techniques so that we don't just have chaos when we're working together like this. It's not people all shouting out what to do, or it's not one person just programming, everyone else is silent, and they're just thinking up in their head what they're going to do and then putting it into code. We used a mechanism that I had been taught was called driver navigators. I learned this for pair programming. The idea was you would have a driver, and then the other person was the navigator. You can think of it as if you're in a car, and one person who is driving is they're in control of the steering wheel and the gas pedal and the brakes, and making sure we're being safe enough on the road. So they're paying attention. And the other person, the navigator, they're looking at the map, and they're paying attention to where we need to turn next. And they will give the driver enough information to be familiar with where we're going so they can continue to drive safely. We might say, in about a mile, we're going to have a right turn. And then we're going to say, in a little while, we'd say, well, in 2 or 3 blocks, we're going to have a right turn. And then we would point out it's the next right turn. So we're giving just the right amount of information as we go so the driver can do their work. And in programming, this was pretty much the same thing. We have a driver, that's the person at the keyboard. Some people call this a typist. And everyone else is a navigator. Now, we would rotate the person at the keyboard, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the basic concept follows a guideline I learned back in 2007 to 2009 in working with a coach who was teaching my team some test-driven mechanisms and things like that. And this was the idea that came from Llewellyn Falco. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. That means that if I have an idea, like, oh, we're going to add a drop down, we need to get some data, I know how to get that data. Someone else would take the keyboard, and I would guide them through how do we write the code to get the data. So this allows everyone on the team to stay informed and to be able to understand the bigger picture, and then they get to see it come to its, I would consider its full fulfillment, and that is being done by the person at the keyboard. Now, if the person at the keyboard isn't real familiar with the code mechanisms we're using, or the language we're using, or maybe the environment, the other people are there to guide them. The navigator is sharing the main idea, but everybody pitches in to help. We just have to be good at only speaking when it's the appropriate, or what I would say is probably the meaningful time to share. So this does seem crazy, and I will admit that. To have 5 or 6 people at one computer just doesn't seem to make sense. The definition of the word preposterous is it's contrary to reason or contrary to common sense. It goes against what we would normally think, or it seems utterly absurd or ridiculous. Well, I do a whole talk on why I believe that this actually works well. This is a good thing to do. But right now, we're just going to share this aspect of it. Even though it's preposterous, it's being done all over the world. I'm going to quickly go through these, but pay particular attention to that each environment is set up differently. Everybody finds their own way to work. You don't need to follow any specific rules. This is Hunter, where we originated the idea, and you can see some of the teams have 2 or 3 large monitors. Some teams only 1. It's up to the team to decide what they need, but the large monitors allow everybody to see what's going on and to be able to see the depth of what we're doing. We might have a development environment open, like an IDE, like Visual Studio or IntelliJ or something. We might have a database editor open. We might have the application open that we're working on, so that every time we refresh it, we can see what it actually looks like. So this is, you set up how you want to, but I'm going to really quickly go through just to show you many different teams working this way. Some of them are just experimenting with it, and some of them are actually full-time, or at least a few days a week are working this way. Here's a group in the UK. I like this setup. Everybody's sitting on one side of the desk, looking across the desk to the monitor. If you're sitting around a table where the monitor is at the end, then everybody has to sit with their neck turned throughout the whole day, and that really becomes uncomfortable. So an important aspect of this is that we set things up for comfort and ease. And when we're working remotely from home, it's a whole lot easier to do than to all be in the same workspace like this. So that's one of the benefits maybe of working remotely. Here's a group in London. A lot of people ask me, GDS is Government Digital Services, by the way. A lot of people ask me, how do you keep people engaged throughout the day working this way? And what I have found is it just naturally happens. We're moving very quickly through the work that we're doing, much quicker than if we had separated to do that work. And we stay engaged because it's interesting, it's fun. We like the progress is happening. Everything about working this way helps keep us engaged. But if you do feel you need to back off and not pay attention for a while, that's okay. You just tell the team, I'm going to check out for a while. I need to give my brain a rest. That's okay too. You don't need to be fully participating all the time. This is a group in Boston. You can see again, they're all focused on their work, no problem. I think I took this picture myself. A lot of these pictures, I didn't take them. This is a group that works out of Stockholm, Sweden called TUI. They have 6 or 7 teams working this way. A group in London called Unruly. When I visited them, they had 6 teams working this way. I don't know if any of these team members are still working there. This team had 5 people, the 4 that you can see, plus the person that was taking the picture. They're teaching this in their computer science agile software development course at Harvard. They actually use mob programming to do it. Sorry for the blurry picture here, but I like to show this. This is a support team that supports customers, and they do it as a team. They answer the phone all together. They'll say, hey, you've got the support team here. This is Mary, Susan, and Elaine working today. How can we help you? And that way they get to the answer for whatever that person needs really quickly. They have a software product that they sell to software developers, and this is how they support them. And here's a little bit nicer picture. This shows a development team at the same company, Zito in San Diego. So, here's a team in South Africa. This is a group that learned, I've met some of these people at conferences, but I never visited them. But I really like to see their work area here. They've got their team agreement on the wall. They've got their Kanban board. What are we working on? What are we going through? Look they have 3 keyboards on the table, all hooked up to that same computer. That's way, it's easy for someone to get a keyboard, and everybody has a choice of using the kind of keyboard they like. This, of course, probably isn't mob programming, but this is a famous figure in programming, Grace Hopper in the center there, Admiral Grace Hopper. She is an important figure in programming. Her team wrote one of the first compilers. She helped design some of these early computers. And I think that her team, or she herself, is honored with, they believe she's the first one to use the term of a bug in our system. And there's an interesting story about that. You can look it up. But look at these people. They're all working at the same computer at the same time, and they're all focused on the problem they're trying to solve. Now, I don't think they're really mob programming, but this is the same idea. We will naturally get together when we need to solve a problem that takes more than one brain. A group in Sweden called Meltwater. I don't know how many teams they have there now, but again, look, they have 3 or 4 keyboards there. Each team member can have their own. This is a group, I think a user group in Germany and one in France. I actually have some pictures from Brazil. I should have added them into my talk today. This is Christophe Thibault, and this is the software craftsmanship group in Paris, France, who came up with some of the coding ideas, coding dojo ideas that turned into, for us, mob programming. So I'm honoring them by putting this picture here. Here's a group in France working, and I can point out here, do you see how this could become uncomfortable over the day? If everybody has to turn their head to see that monitor when they're working, that could be difficult. Here's a group in Japan sitting on the floor. I visited 3 or 4 teams there. I didn't visit this team, but they're working all together in the same space. Another place in Japan. Again, not a very good environment, but you work with the environment you have. It's much easier to set things up nicely when you're working remotely. The last picture or two I want to show you, first of all, this one, I wanted to just point out the use of the whiteboards. Whiteboards and mechanisms for communicating on a large board and line, we have to use things like Miro or Mural or a document. This is a very, very powerful thing. Learning to work out your ideas at the whiteboard really helps us keep our ideas in front of everybody. I think of the whiteboard as being a temporary memory location, just like in a computer, where we can store an idea for a little time while using it, and when we're done, we can wipe it off. We don't need it anymore. So I'm going to show you just 2 or 3 teams that are working remotely. This is Corgi Bites. These people are spread out across the East Coast of the US. This group is Zapier. They've written about their experiences doing this. And another group is Cucumber.io. The Cucumber people support the Cucumber environment, which is used for behavior-driven development. And they've been, as far as I know, doing mob programming for 5 or 6 years now, maybe 7 years now. And they've been always working remotely in supporting this. They're mostly across England. But there you go. It is difficult to work across time zones. The further you are time zone-wise, it can be a little bit more difficult. One quick thing I want to point out, this is NASA. This is not programming, but they're all working on the same mission at the same time. They brought together all the necessary knowledge, all the necessary skills. There's nobody in this room that doesn't need to be there. There are some remote workers because there's other people around the world, but during the mission, they're very focused on what they're doing. And you have to staff every one of these consoles with at least one human being all the time, and they usually work in pairs. Each specialty is got their own monitors, but the whole team has these larger monitors across the top there, so they can be aware of the holistic nature of this, and they could be paying attention to their own specific specialties at their desk. They can then communicate to the rest if there's a problem, and maybe that information will go up on the main screen. So this is a similar idea to mob programming. It's not exactly the same, but it gives me a lot of, I don't know if the word is comfort, to realize that a lot of people have learned to work in these highly technical things as teams working at the same time on the same thing. So why would we work this way? Now, I normally do this as an exercise, but I'm going to skip ahead and just show you some of the reasons. Why would we gather together as a team and all work together on one thing at a time as a team? So this is some of the things that we've noticed. We get a lot of knowledge sharing, so your ability to learn things just really amplified. We're going to get continuous code and design review, and as Joshua Karievsky says, we get the continuous integration of ideas. So we share our ideas, and as they grow, it's not over weeks or months, it's within a few hours. We get to see many perspectives on the work, and this allows us to get a deeper understanding very, very quickly. This is an interesting thing to me. Part of this is rapid feedback, and that's an important Agile concept. If we can't get rapid feedback, we can't respond to problems quickly. We need to have a way to do that. And here we have everybody there that could give us feedback is all sitting together. Now, there is some other feedback we need to get, maybe from end users, but that will come much sooner than later when we work this way, because we're delivering stuff to production almost immediately throughout the day. And that's a powerful thing as well. Well, let's continue on. So we found that we would focus on the right things, whereas before, when we decided what we were going to do ahead of time, divided it up into the different tasks, and people would go off and work alone on them, we didn't recognize problems that we were working on the wrong thing as quickly. And now we will find out real quick, you know, this doesn't seem right, and we'll move on to working on the right thing pretty quickly. So this leads to higher quality and to better solutions. All of these things together. This is what we found. These are the benefits that we found, and hopefully you can recognize this, the possibility of this. We eliminate queues and reduce inventory. Queues and inventory are waste. A queue is whenever you have to wait to get an answer to a question that's blocking you, or wait for someone else to finish so you can then do your part. All the queuing, and there's many other kinds of waiting, all of this slows us down, and it's waste. It increases our cycle time, but we'll talk about that some other day. But it also increases our inventory. If I'm working on one thing and I get blocked or have to wait for someone to come and help me get through something I'm trying to do, I'm not going to just sit there. I pick something else to work on. And now I've introduced inventory. We really only want to have one thing to work on at a time. I know it's sometimes hard to understand that, but I'd be happy to bring you through that some other time. Reducing inventory is critical, but also it enhances the flow of the work. So eliminating queues and reducing inventory means everything we work on will go from start to finish as directly as possible. Hopefully you can see that's a big benefit without the distractions, the context switching, the interruptions that we would get if we weren't all working together. And lastly, we found it to be more fun and less stressful and very engaging. Now, if you find you start working this way and it is not more engaging, or it's more stressful and it's not fun, that stop, reflect on why, and consider what we might want to change about the way we're working. We have to get good at working with each other for this to become more fun, less stressful, and more engaging. Okay, so I'm going to answer this from a slightly different point of view. Why would we work this way? Because the team decided to. Most companies I've worked at, the team is not allowed to decide how they're going to work. They just have to work however they're told to work. They're told who they'll work with, what team they'll be on, what items they'll work on. They're even told each day what they're going to work on and what meetings they need to go to, and on and on and on. We were given the freedom in this original team to figure out for ourselves what would work best. And that allowed us to decide how we wanted to work. And this is what we ended up with. About 6 months, we were studying ways to improve our code, ways to improve our nature of work, ways to improve our ability to collaborate. And accidentally, and hopefully I'll have time to share this bit of the story, one day we stumbled upon this accidentally, that we could work all together at one computer all day long. And until that, we were experimenting with pair programming and other ways of collaborating. So this is the basic concept. We're going to optimize for the flow of the work. That means working directly on something till it's done, rather than breaking it up and working on it in little bits. And we're not going to optimize for the output of the individual. If you later on in your careers, you ever work at a place and you get this database person on your team, for example, but they're only allowed to work 20% of their time on your team because they're going to work 30% of their time on another team and 30% on another team, and maybe 20% of their time doing overhead things, meetings and stuff that has nothing to do with actual work. So when we divide people like that up, an individual into working on different teams, we're usually doing that to try and optimize for the skills of this maybe a scarce resource of a database expert. And actually that's harmful. And we want to understand, how can we work the opposite? We're not trying to increase our speed of our work, but one of the side benefits is things would get done rapidly. So sometimes when you try to solve a problem, if you try to solve specifically the problem you think you have, you're going to end up with a solution that's not very good. But if you move out maybe to a larger scope and you try to pay attention, or I should say, I try to pay attention to creating an environment where good things can happen, then a lot of the problems we normally have would just disappear or fade away. It's working at a different level than the level where we see the problem. Okay, we're not trying to get the most work out of each person. We're trying to get the best work from each person. We're trying to get the best of what each person can do. And if we can find a way to do that, that's a super benefit. Let's speed ahead a little bit. I want to tell you the story of how this started. They had interviewed me and asked me to come in basically to work with a team that wasn't doing very good. And this next slide represents how it felt to me when I visited this team. They seemed like they were zombies, that nobody was engaged or excited about their work. It was drudgery going through their day. So I know when that happens, that usually means that they're being forced to work in a way that isn't conducive to the excellence that I want to see. They had some big problems and they had some big projects. The big projects two of them were behind a year. That's not a good thing. When we're behind at all, we're probably managing things in a less than optimal way. We should never be behind in software development. We have to change the way we think about it. But they were asking me to become the manager of this team, work with them to turn them into a high-performing team. And I told them, I can't do that. I can't. You want a hero. Why aren't you already managing them in this magical way that you think exists? There's no such way to do that. So they wanted a hero, and I told them, I'm not a hero, and there are no heroes. Maybe Joe Yoder is a hero, but most of the rest of us are just mere shadows. I want to point something out here. The hero themselves, if they believe that they're a hero, probably aren't. So you can't ever recognize yourself as a hero. But in this picture, I'm trying to show a hero is a capable person, not afraid of doing any battle with any alien. They've got a full head of hair, and they're handsome, and they're young, and they're not afraid. They'll take on any challenge. I'm not any of those things. Certainly not at this age. I used to be a little better looking maybe than I am now, but I did have some hair when I was younger. You get the picture. You can't hire a hero. What I told them was this team is not performing because their management style is hampering them from being able to perform the way they should. And this is an indictment of the managers. And I told this point blank to the managers who were interviewing me. And the main boss, the CEO, or I should say the CTO of the group, he understood this, that they weren't able to manage this team and they were looking for a better way to manage them. So this is what I told them. I need to work without interference. The reason you're hiring me is because you don't know what to do. So you cannot tell me what to do. Now, that may not work for everybody, but by this point in my career, I'd built a reputation of being able to bring agile thinking and agile mindset to a team. And so, they were willing to put up with this. I told them I have to have the right to cancel or postpone any work. If the team's already late, that means they're probably not capable of doing this work. Let's stop trying to do something we can't do. Let's learn how to do it. And then we'll tackle the work again. I told them we won't do any estimates. I don't believe estimates are useful in software development. As a matter of fact, I think they're harmful. They introduce problems that we really want to avoid, but it's a deep subject. So I talked to my boss, the person who was going to hire me, and I told them I won't do estimates. If people come to us and need estimates, you're going to have to do them, and we will not contribute to that process. My team will not be doing estimates. And so I asked from him a letter from the CEO, the top person in the company. I want a letter that says, to whom it may concern, this team and this manager are not allowed to do estimates. And so I wanted that paper because I knew people would come to me and say, we need an estimate for some work that we want you to do. And I could get out the paper and I could say, hey, I'd love to do your estimates, but look, I'm not allowed to do estimates. So go talk to my boss. Maybe he can give you an estimate. So this was required for them to hire me. The last thing is we're not going to do projects. So project is where you gather a bunch of people together. You sign them to the project. You have a requirements document. You're going to work through that till it's done. Someday it's done and you deliver it. Well, that's not the modern way to work. I wanted to be working as if it's a product. We will take on the work, but we will deliver it in little bits starting with the very first day. And we'll work on it until nobody's interested in adding anything more to it. And then maybe later they'll want some more stuff and we'll reactivate our working on it. But most of the time, we will just work on it until they've got most of the things they're interested in. I found that we can do 5 to 10% of the work of a project if we approach it this way. And the other 90% of the work, nobody really cares about. And then we don't need to do that. That's the big savings, in my opinion, of working in an iterative, agile, and lean manner. So let's figure out how to work well together is something the team needed to do. And this is what I explained to the managers, that the people doing the work can most easily learn the best way to manage that work. So I wanted to see that happen. So the team's going to manage itself. They're going to turn into a self-managing team. But also, we need to learn to recognize what bad code looks like, so we can learn to what to do about it. At this time, I don't think this team could recognize bad code. Joe, I think I have to ask, is it okay if I continue? We might go all the way through the whole hour and not have time for questions, but I kind of would like to finish this. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go ahead and continue some. Is that how much time do we have total, Alfredo? Do we have a little bit more than an hour, I'm hoping?
About 15 minutes more, maybe 20
Okay.
minutes more.
So we'll still have a little bit of time. So yeah, go. But don't go past an hour. It's important to have some dialogue, and we have some other stuff.
I'll do my best to get through this little bit, and we're kind of in one way to the end when we finish this part, so we could make that a stopping spot. Okay, so basically, I knew that they needed to learn things, but I didn't want to tell them they needed to learn things. As their new manager, how would you like it if you're working someplace, the new manager comes in and says, hey, I'm really glad to be here because you are terrible at writing code. You're going to need to learn to become much better, or we're going to fire you. You know, you wouldn't want to work in an environment like that. You've already been there for a while. You think you're doing a good job. I knew from experience that I just need to interest them in improving. And once they get that interest, they'll want to learn the things they need to learn. But I don't want to tell them their code isn't very good, but their code wasn't very good. So I told them, though, that we're going to set aside time. I told my boss, we're going to set aside time to practice and learn together. This is an early thing that I had learned maybe 20 years ago. When we practice together, we start learning to collaborate. And when we don't practice together, we don't learn that skill. So practicing without the pressure of the work itself gave us the ability to learn to collaborate well. And we did that by using a specific way of practicing called a coding dojo. I won't go into too much detail, but it's a way of having a group sitting together and you switch out the pair that's at the computer. So you're doing pair programming, but you're doing it with a group. So each pair gets a little bit of time at the computer, and then we switch. So the person who's navigating becomes the driver. The next person in line becomes the next navigator, and off we go. We'll go into the details of this maybe some other day if you get a chance to bring me back. But we were also needing to focus on getting good results from our retrospectives. Most companies that do retrospectives aren't doing them very effectively. And what I'd learned over time was, rather than just doing them daily, I mean, a weekly or every 2 weeks, we should also do them daily. At the end of every day, we would talk to each other a little bit about what went on and what was going well for us. And I'm really talking about only for 5 minutes, what went well for us and how can we get more of that tomorrow? And I call that turning up the good. I wanted them to learn this concept of turning up the good. Pay attention to what's going well and make that even better. We get more benefit from doing that rather than always facing the problems we have. And that would take a whole nother session. One day it was time to resurrect one of the projects I had basically canceled or postponed. One of the developers came to me and she was worried we're going to miss our next deadline. We already missed last year's. It needed to be ready for January 1st. And they missed the last year's January 1st, the year I arrived there in May. And then she said, well, they're going to want this in a few months. This was in October or so. And I said, okay, what do you want to do about it? She said, well, let me take a developer. We'll go take a look at the code and decide what we need to do about it. She came back to me in about an hour and said, hey, this has got a lot of bad code. And she said it this way, there's a lot of unknowns lurking under the surface. The application loads up and it looks like it's working, but it's not. And the code, if you go and look at the code, you'll see it's got all kinds of code smells. They were learning about code smells in our weekly sessions. And we were learning how to work with each other in our weekly sessions. So I said, well, what do you want to do about it? And she said, let's gather everybody together in a meeting and decide who should be working on this. I'll show them the code, let the team decide who should be working on this, and then they'll go forward to work on this project. Now, I really was going to cancel the project, but I was letting the team make their own decisions. They didn't know I had the right to cancel projects. But instead of just looking at it, we started working on it together. One of the team members looked at the code as this programmer was showing it and said, can you scroll down through that code a little bit? Can you scroll down through that method a little further? Can you scroll down a little further? One method we were scrolling through, and it had like 400 lines of code, which is way too many. I don't know what you're being taught, but basically, I like to see methods that are only 10, 20 lines of code. Rather than just looking at the code, we decided at that very moment to start refactoring it. There's a thing nowadays, it's called read by refactoring. And with read by refactoring, you will get a better understanding of the code if you simply start refactoring it without any understanding. If you use very fast, very safe, small refactoring practices, you can do this. Now I'm going to only go for a minute or so longer, and then we'll go to questions and answers. But here's what happened. During that session, we only gathered together for an hour and a half or 2-hour meeting to look at the code. Then somebody came into the room we were in and said, we've reserved this room, you have to leave. And so rather than going back to our desks and saying, well, we'll have another meeting tomorrow or next week, somebody on the team said, let's go find an empty room. Across our company, we have maybe 40 or 50 meeting rooms. We were able to find an empty room, and we went to that empty room. And we were able to stay there for a couple hours. And at the end of that couple hours, they said, let's go find another empty room, but we'll come back after lunch. The rest of the day, we worked together. At the end of the day, we had our daily retrospective where we all stand up together and quickly ask, what was good about today? And everybody said, boy, working together is great. And then we said, we asked, well, why is that great? What was great about it? We got a lot done. It was a very high quality. We learned a lot, and it was fun. Well, any one of those is enough for me to say, let's get more of it. But I asked the team, how do you want to turn this up for tomorrow? And they said, well, why don't you just book rooms for tomorrow, and we'll come in and we'll just do this again tomorrow. After a week of doing this in our daily retrospectives, somebody said, we really need to get a permanent room. We're moving from room to room, and that's really not working. Let's find a permanent room. That'll turn up the good on us being able to collaborate. And we did that. That was, again, 9 years ago. And they continue to work this way. Now, I want to make the point of this whole talk, and then we'll go to questions. The point of this whole talk is this combination of little ideas I just shared. The team will figure out how to work together. The team will determine how to manage themselves. We're going to learn about clean code and how to make code that works well and is easy to maintain. We're going to have study sessions. And while we started out with weekly study sessions of 3 or 4 hours, we increased it to also adding a daily study session. After a few months, we would study for an hour every day together and then do our work. And we're going to focus on good retrospectives and on turning up the good. So the point to me isn't that we did mob programming. The point is that we created an environment where something like mob programming could arise. I like to say it this way. There was no magic. It wasn't that we could instantly learn how to do something new and different. But in a way, everything is magic. The humans are a magical thing. They'll do wonderfully if you start creating that environment where great things can happen. So last slide I'm going to show you is this one. This is a quote from a famous artist, and I love this quote. The object isn't to make art, it's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. So our goal isn't to write great software. It's to be in this wonderful state or have a wonderful environment where great software will happen, where we will collaborate well, the ideas will flow, good things will come forward, we'll focus on the good, and then we will just get this great software. That's what we found. Now I have another 3 or 4 hours I could talk, but let me go ahead and take a couple questions, and then we'll be done when we're done. I hope that was useful.
Thank you. Thank you, Woody. Very, very nice. Thank you very much for the presentation.
It was.
So are there any questions?
I just have a comment. I really like that we have always to focus on continuous improvement and have a healthy environment where all the people are working together and happy. This is a must. So I would like to see the students asking questions. Please go ahead. If you are not well enough to talk in English, if you do not feel that you can talk in English, talk in Portuguese, we can translate for you.
And also, if you want, just go ahead and type it in the chat as well.
Hi. I was wondering, how can you keep the deadlines off the table? I guess working with the team is the easiest part, but the other part about not having projects and like this deliver dates, it's something that I don't know how it could.
So are you asking, how can we do a project or work on this product when we're no longer working in the traditional requirements, documents, and deadlines and schedule? Is that sort of what you're asking?
Yeah, without schedule.
Yeah. So what I found starting almost exactly 20 years ago was that the normal way of managing projects with the deadlines and all that doesn't work very well. So although I had experienced that myself, people across our industry were experiencing that. We're talking 20 years ago. And so the Agile ideas came up, and it was 30 and 40 years ago, but 20 years ago, the Agile thing rose to the surface. And the basic idea with Agile is, let's stop thinking we know what the future will be. We cannot predict the future. And when we pretend we can, we're just fooling ourselves. So having the schedule, we can have a schedule, we'll work every day. There's our schedule. But what we want to do is discover the most important and best aspects of the product we're trying to deliver and get those delivered. And once we get good at doing that, the need for the schedules and the need for the estimates evaporates. So I've found this over and over in working at different companies. As I would introduce these mechanisms, the desire to know when something will be done becomes much less interesting to us because we start getting product almost right away. When it takes us 2 years to write a project, we want to know when it will be done. How much are we going to pay? What are we going to get when we're done? When we learn to deliver little bits at a time, it changes it. It changes it.
Yeah.
It's like if you needed to plan ahead all the food you're going to eat over the next year, that would be, and buy it now, it probably wouldn't be a very good way to have our world.
And partly, I'm just gonna follow up with this too. It's you can have being agile. It's more like a rough adaptive schedule. And so I've worked with companies that are swarming and doing mobbing and stuff like that. They still have to prioritize and still have to schedule certain things with customers and things. And you can still do that and still do mobbing programming. So let me get to a couple other questions here.
Yes.
A couple that we have in the chat. Is there an ideal number of people for mob programming that you found during your experience, and a max?
So in a way there is, but we do this with heuristics. So I have 2 heuristics that we developed, and we probably could come up with some more. The first one is the team too large? And that will show up by having people that don't feel they're learning anything or contributing anything. If you're not learning or contributing, you probably don't need to be here. So you don't need to be on this team. The skills that you need are already there. You can't ahead of time know what that will be, and that's what the second heuristic is about. So do we need to grow this team? Will come from, do we have a missing skill on this team? So we're working, and how we discover this is, we have a question that we can't answer ourselves. That means there's somebody on the team that isn't on the team. So somebody we need to add to the team. We can either get that knowledge into our own heads by learning it, or we can find, if we're frequently going to somebody with questions, that's a person who needs to be on the team. And when we first discovered that, there were 3 like that. One was the product owner. One was what we would now call DevOps people who did the deployments and setting up environments and so on. And the third one was the database experts, because they were all on different teams. And they were the ones we would have to go to frequently to interact with. And over time, we were able to bring all of that onto the team. So this is how we can know what's the right size. Once a famous agilist, Ron Jeffries, asked me, well, there must be a limit to the size. And I said, well, the most we ever had was 17 people all at one time in front of a computer, because we needed the knowledge of those 17 people for something that was really critical. And then he said, well, what if we filled the Michigan football stadium, which I guess has space for 100,000 people? Would that be too many? And I said, I don't know. Let's try it. Get me 100,000 people. I'll meet you there. And then let's see what happens. Because I don't know. I'd love to see 100,000 people programming together. So there you go. I think that answers it.
Thank you on that. And yeah, I've generally seen 5 to 7 as a very good number too, but they can vary once again, like what he said. So here's another one. Woody mentioned the driver navigator model. How were the productivity variations in the teams that implemented this idea? Tim using driving navigator style mob programming. So what was the productivity variations in the teams that implemented that the strong style programming, I guess, the strong style.
Yeah, they call that strong style. I can only speak to my own experiences. There may be people doing studies about this now, but what I found was when I switched to using this mechanism for pair programming, my productivity increased massively. So I did experiment with some ideas like this back in 2002 or so. But I didn't really see it as a separate way of working until 2007, when I worked with this fellow Llewellyn who was doing it that way, and I realized how effective it was. So I started switching over all of my pair programming interactions to this strong style pairing. Otherwise, if somebody's sitting there and the idea's in their head and they're typing it in, they're putting it into a code that we need to uncipher or decipher when we're trying to understand their idea. Now, they might go to the whiteboard or explain it as they go, but what I found is that we get a much better collaboration, a much better communication if we just abandon the keyboard when we're the one with the idea. So I don't know of any studies, but if you're in school and you want to get do a research paper and maybe find a PhD that you can get out of this, that would be a great subject to study. And
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. In fact, I am working with a few different professors with experimentation on that's for sure. But yeah, we're definitely looking for that. Here's the next one is how do mob programming team approach different levels of expertise in the teams? How to make the whole team to feel invited to collaborate? Good question.
Yes. And so this is really critical. We have to learn to include all the voices. We might think that somebody we are always, no matter what work we're doing, we're going to have different levels of expertise. Now, if we're working with what I would call a cross-functional, fully cross-functional team, each member is going to be, to some degree, an expert in their own area, but they still might not be expert in everything we need to do to work well as a team. They're certainly not going to be expert in all the other skills that we need. But we can draw it out of each other. So we get, there's an old saying that goes something like this: everybody is smarter than anybody. So when we bring a team together, the individual will become smarter because they now have this team collective intelligence. When we get good at that, we're going to get the better results. Now, sometimes we'll add someone to the team and they're an intern or very much a beginner. Their main job is going to be to learn, but also we learn by contributing and trying ideas. So one thing that's very important, if somebody shares a concept or an idea, we will always try it. Even if we think there's a better idea. If somebody says, I think we can do it this way, and I'm going inside myself, oh, I don't think that's going to work, I still will say, let's give it a try. So we need to get good at inviting others. So this is how we give safety on the team. If every person on the team has a safety to share an idea and have it tried without somebody else telling them that's not going to work, they will become, and the whole team will become better at sharing their ideas.
Yes.
And over time, am I still sharing the screen or do I need to shut that off?
No, you're not sharing the screen at this time.
Okay.
Oh,
so I would, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to move on to the next question. We still have a few more. A lot of good
questions
questions here. So and you're giving great answers. So I just wanted, here's the next one is, how are the study sessions, or maybe they're talking about the learning sessions organized? Do you choose a common topic to read research, or somebody from the team share something of his expertise, or how do you do that?
So both of those or all of those are things that we've done. When we first did it, before we were mob programming, my main goal was to just get them studying together. But we have to have a topic to study. And so I asked the team, what do you want to learn about? Well, several people on the team knew that I bought everybody 3 books: the Clean Code book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code book, and Refactoring to Patterns book. Those are 3 well-known books. I still think they're pretty good. Even now, it's you know, those books were written 10 and more years ago. The thing is that I bought everybody a copy of those 3 books and put it on their desks. In one of my earliest meetings, I said, hey, you'll see some books on your desks. These are good books for me. I use them all the time. You don't need to read them. You can just put them in the corner, or you can read them. A couple of people started reading them. So at the end of the week, when we did our first study session, somebody held up a book and said, I want to learn the stuff in this book. So I let the team decide, and then I let them decide how we would study. And one of them had participated in one of our coding dojo sessions at a user group and said, hey, I really liked the, yeah, we can capture those books for you into the notes somewhere. I told them, well, they'd come to a workshop or a user group that I was at, and they said, let's try that. And I would have asked them to try it if somebody didn't bring it up, because all it takes is maybe at the most 1 or 2 hours of doing that, and you'll get sold on the idea. The way we did it was very specific. I don't have time to explain it now. So at first, we would just start picking off stuff from that book, the Clean Code book, and we used the Coding Dojo. But as we learned these things, other topics would come up, and then we had a list. We had a sheet on the wall. Anybody could write an idea of something they wanted to study. And after a while, we started learning how to do TDD quite a bit, and that became our main focus for several years. And our daily teaching session was about something that was very pertinent to what we had done the day before. We would suggest at the end of the day, what do you think we need to learn tomorrow that would have made today easier? And somebody would suggest something, and then we'd make that the topic. And somebody would prepare overnight to read up on it a little bit, so they could start us off. I allowed the team to figure out for themselves how they would do it. Each one of you maybe are assigned teams you work on in your studies. You can experiment with these things on teams like that.
Okay, thank you. The next one that we have is if a team chooses to work just a few days a week, or maybe only one day like H&M we saw or whatever, is there a good criteria to choose the best tasks for this?
So first of all, when I want a team to experiment with ideas like this, they often don't have all week long, you know, to do that. So we will do it in smaller chunks. But I let the team decide. But I would say this at first, if you only have a little bit of time and you want to try these things out, it's one good thing to work on is bugs, because bugs are usually self-contained. So how do you choose? I would like to let the team choose. They get together and they decide what's the best, what should we work on. Some people believe that mob programming is really valuable for the big, difficult, complicated stuff. But I believe it's good for anything. And we can learn the skills of working well together if we're working on simpler stuff at first. You know, I used to teach music lessons. I wouldn't set somebody down and put some music in front of them and say, hey, this is something Mozart wrote. That's where we're going to start. We're going to start with a very simple thing. And then we'll move on to, as we get our skills, we'll move on to more difficult things. So, you know, how do you choose? There's always something that needs to get done in a rush. It's probably better to learn how to work well together on something that we don't have so much pressure on us. Let's do something that's a little less pressured. I hope that was helpful. There's probably 1,000 different ways.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I like that. If there's bugs or there's other things to learn, or if there's challenges where let's break, you know, it turns the whole team. So I've even seen where teams are getting together one day a week, and or whenever an issue comes up, let's just swarm at this point, mob at this point. Yeah. And then we'll split back to our pair programming, which is a form of swarming, or whatever the teams are doing, however they're working. But it still provides value. Even I remember H&M when we went there in Sweden that one time, is they would pick one day a week where they would get together and do that. And they were finding a lot of value in that, just that one day a week. The next question.
Well, have we run out of time? Are we getting near where we need to be?
One more question. We'll do one more question. Then there's some things I need to also present. So last one.
I could stay till for another day. So let's go ahead and just do that. One last question.
And I also have a lot I could say as well, but we don't want to right now, I guess. What should we do when a team simply doesn't work? I mean, when people are just not in the same page and we can't get the job done, should we just reallocate everybody and find new people that can work together? Great question.
Yes. So for many years, I've specialized in working with people who are willing, they want to do this, and they're open to the idea that they need to change something about themselves to be able to work better with others. You can't force someone to get a good personality. You can't force someone to become really good at the people skills. But we will all get better. I know as a child in my family, my father had very good people skills. I could watch him in his interactions in the community, and later in the years I worked with him. I learned a lot just from watching how he interacted with people. So just getting some people together who are willing, our skills will start building, and then a funny thing happens. That team will start talking about it, and other people who before didn't think it was for them, they might start joining in. So rather than, I don't think it's good to force people to have to work together. And there are some people who just never can get together. I've had a few people, they
and
just
those people
can't.
still add value to your organization, so you find a different way. They're still part of the team, but I mean, even when you look at with NASA, you know, there was forming in a whole, but then there was individual type pairing, and occasionally there's individuals doing stuff that might also have to interrupt the team or stuff with important stuff. But yeah, it's yeah.
These skills took me many years to develop. Yeah. And Joe, you've worked with me a little bit on a few things we've done. You know as well as anyone, I'm far from perfect. I probably meet people often that are school age, college or high school, who are more advanced than I am in working with other people. They naturally are better at it.
Yeah.
But I think I'm living proof that we can improve our skills and improve our other.
Woody, Joe, it's really interesting, but as I always say to my students, the most important part of a software is about the clients, and the clients are waiting for us. We are going to have our first meeting with the clients. They are going to meet the clients. So,
by the way, I'm going to finish with saying go to mobprogramming.org. There's also remotemobprogramming.org, talking about a lot of, you can get a free book if you want, that most of it's online. And then I want to offer in the future, Alfredo, Professor Goldman, is just to let you know, is the got to do the, you know, the important acknowledgement stuff there. Yeah, but I'm available for a lot of your team members. I can do remote coaching with a lot of you as well. I've already told Alfredo that, and I'll pair up. And I even have some follow-up stuff that I can do later in a week or whatever, even with some remote mob programming tips and stuff like that. I wanted you to at least hear the core, because Woody has a lot of great stuff. And Woody has a great experience report. If you go to the AgileAlliance.org, his first 2014 was a great experience report talking about this, and there's been a ton more. So, but if you go there and you Google remote mob program, or I mean mob programming and Woody, you'll find the experience report. You'll find that off the Agile Alliance. It's a very good paper and worth reading on that as well. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
Just one last thing, Woody, I would like to invite you to come back in about 1 month, because then they will be able to ask real good questions, because they will be used to do some more mob programming. Or
so let's have an open question and answer period, pick our brains, see what you've learned, see what you can teach me. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I'd love to do it.
More than that, share good experience. What was good for one group can be good for other group, and so on. So thank you, guys. It was wonderful. I really have to go to the clients. Do you know software need clients?
Learn clients. No, that's important. Clients are good. Hey, good to see everybody. And I'll be talking to you soon. Hope to see everybody again very, very soon. So, and thank you, Woody. Thank Woody, everybody. Let's thank Woody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
So, everyone, now we are going back to Discord, and you can go to your class or to your group to find the clients. See you, Joe. So,
João.
Oi.
A gente pode falar?
Agora pode interromper a transmissão.
Já está interrompida.
E pode interromper a gravação. E vamos lá. Pessoal, ir para o Discord.